Hey there. In this video, we're going to look at transforming nested tables inside of Power Query. It sounds complicated. It's actually pretty easy once you get the hang of it, and one of the easiest ways to get the hang of it is to watch somebody else do it, hence this video. So let's go ahead and get started. By the way, I'm Brian Grant, and I'm here representing CSG Pro. Let's go ahead and close this and get to the meat of the video. So we're going to start off with a table that looks something like this. I'm going to, let's see, yeah, right here. I'm going to go back one, just because I think it's a little bit easier to look at. So here's basically what we're going to be looking at. We've got this table from a CSV, or whatever data source, and clearly it's sales data for all these different stores, and it's sort of broken down by week, and you've sort of got these mini tables in your data for the week. So here we have data for week 1, here we have data for week 2, and here we have data for week 3. So what we want to be able to do is sort of combine these into one big table. And we're going to use some table transformations to make that happen nice and dynamically. So I'm going to go here to my last step where all those blanks are replaced by nulls. It's a little harder to look at, but it's still not too bad. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and remove all the blank rows. So it's good practice anyways, and here it's going to make the tables a little easier to look at. Remove blank rows. There we go. We also don't need this first row here where it says total sales. Don't need that. So I could go remove top rows. You can do it that way. I'm a big fan of coming over here. I'm going to left click on this icon, and I'm going to remove top rows. How many do I want to remove? Just the one. Just the one. Okay, so just moving forward, what I'm going to do is I'm going to see here that I've got, for this first column, I've got east and I've got west and I've got all these nulls, and these are clearly my stores. So the null isn't really no region. It probably means this is east and these two are west. What we're going to do is we're going to fill down. We're going to fill down. Fill down. So those nulls are there to make it easier to look at, but we need to be able to parse the data correctly. So we're going to fill down. So it's east all the way down and west all the way down. This is starting to look more like three distinct tables. Okay. So now what we see is we could tell that where each week starts, because the first row in it says week number. So week number there, and week number there. And here you can see that we've got the actual week codes here, week 090516. That's because it starts on the 5th of September in 2016. And there's the code for that week, and there's the code for that week. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a custom formula that is going to allow us to flag each one of these rows with which week it is associated with. So let's head up here to add column, add custom column. We're going to call this week flag. And the formula is pretty simple. We're going to check to say, hey, if the value in column 1 is equal to week, the text string week number, well then, if that's true, then we know that it's the first row in the week. We're going to go ahead and get the value from column 2, which is the week code. Otherwise, we're just going to get null or nothing or blank, right? So now we can see that at the start of each week, we've got the week code in this row. So we're going to do that same trick we did a second ago where we fill down to fill all these values down through all the nulls. So each null is going to get the nearest value above it that isn't also null. So we go, we right click, we go to fill, and down. There we go. So now you can see here where we go from week 1 to week 2, the week flag goes from 0905 to 0912. And here it goes from 0912 to 0919. Perfect. Okay. So in a second, we're going to use this to break this whole table up into 3 separate smaller tables. But before we do, we're going to come over here and say, hey, this isn't really the week number. This is really sort of the store region. So this would probably be store, and this would be store region. We'll change this in a few minutes. But for right now, let's change this. So we're going to change everywhere where it says week number, we want it to say region. So we're going to right click up here. We're going to replace values, and we're going to replace week number colon with region. And click OK. Great. Okay. So now we've got that taken care of. And remember, we've got this column over here, which has 3 different values in it, one for each week. So it identifies each one of these rows with which week it belongs to. So all these values belong to 0905. All these values belong to 0912. And all these values belong to 0919. So what we could do is we can group by this column here. And what you've probably done before is you've done a group by, and you've said, hey, I want to do like a count rows to find out how many rows are associated with each one of these weeks. Well, we don't want to do that. What we're going to do is we're going to change the operation to all rows. So there's no actual aggregator happening right now. And we're going to call this week table, and what we're going to end up with is a table that's got 3 rows in it, 1 for each week, and then this new column which has each week's table in it, right? Boom. Week 1, week 2, week 3. Notice how this one starts on the 19th, this one starts on the 12th, and this one starts on the 5th. So what we had a second ago is 3 separate tables, is now, or as one big table, is now 3 separate tables, okay, stored in this sort of bigger outer table. So what we could do is we could start using table transformations, the same table transformations we get whenever we click on these buttons on these little micro tables inside of the larger table, okay? So what does that mean? Well, for instance, if we see in each one of these little micro tables, we've got this, still got this week flag column, and we don't really need that anymore. So we're going to go ahead and get rid of that. So to do that, I'm going to go add custom column, and I'm going to say delete week flag, and I'm going to do a table.remove columns. And rather than removing one of the tables from the previous steps, I'm going to remove a column from each one of these tables, right? So rather than working with a table before it in the applied steps process, I'm going to do it one at a time for each one of these little mini tables. Okay, so we're going to remove columns from the week table column. Week table column. Okay. And which columns do we want to remove? Well, let's see. What's this thing called again? It's called week flag. Okay, and I'm going to close the parentheses out. If there were multiple columns we want to remove, we can add a comma here and list out all the different columns. We only want to get rid of one. See, week flag, there's no space in there. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. So now here we had this table, which still had the week flag. And we've added this formula, which says, hey, go get this table and remove week flag. See, it's not there anymore. It's there, and it's not there anymore. Okay, and we can sort of keep proceeding like this. So the next thing we want to do is we want to promote the headers for each one of these tables. If we notice the proper headers aren't column 1 through column 7, it's more like region and all the dates. So let's go ahead and do that. Very easy. Add custom column. I'm sorry, I did that a little fast. Add column, add custom column. We're going to call this promoted headers. And the function is pretty easy. It's table.promote headers. And we're going to promote the table we just finished making, delete week flag. So each one of these little tables we're going to promote the headers of and put the results into a new column. Boom. So here's where we were. That first row is what should be the headers. And now it is the headers, right? We don't have that column 1, column 2 through column 7 nonsense. Okay, these are the actual headers. Good, okay. So what we're moving towards is we want to be able to unpivot everything but these first 2 columns. But to do that, we have to name each one of these first 2 columns. And if you'll notice, the first column is always region, but the second column, it uses the week code. So we have to rename all of these. And unfortunately, you can't just tell Power Query to go rename the second column. You have to be very explicit and name it, well, explicitly. But we can still do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to do 2 things. We're going to start by getting a list of the headers, and we're going to get the second item in that list. Okay. So again, promoted headers. We're going to go to Add Columns, Add Custom Column, do column names, and we're going to do the table.column names function. Go get the names of the table. Well, which table do you want to get the names of? Each one of these little promoted headers tables. All 3 of them, one after the other. You don't need these spaces I just added. I like them. Makes it easier to read. Okay, now we're not getting a table, we're getting a list. And what's the list? Well, it's all the different names of the headers. So region, W, blah, 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 and 9.5. Region, W, blah, 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 and 9.5. So region, W09, other thing. Region, W09, other thing. Okay? So now if we get the second item from each one of these lists, we'll get the name of the second column in each one of these tables. So to do that, very easy. We're going to, again, go to Add Column, Add Custom Column, and we're going to call this column name. And we're going to go to the column names, plural, and just get one of them. And we're going to get the second one. Well, Power Query is 0 indexed, which means if I want the first item in a list, I'm going to type in the curly braces with a 0 in the middle. It says, hey, go get the first item in that. But we don't want the first, we want the second. So rather than doing 0, we're going to do 1. And we're going to click OK. So now, if we sort of preview over here, we see that for each one of these promoted headers tables, we've got the name of the second column, 0905, 0905, 0912, 0912. Great. So now we can go ahead and rename the column for each one of these little tables. So we're going to go add, we're going to go to add column, add custom column, and we're going to call this rename, and it's going to be a table dot rename, spell that right, columns. Well, which tables do we want to rename? Do we want to rename these? Well, those aren't tables, those are text strings. Well, these are lists. We want to rename the columns in this promoted headers, all those little tables. So double click promoted headers. We want to rename columns in each one of those. Okay, well, for each one, what we need is what we're going to rename and what we're going to rename it to. Well, we're going to rename it from this code to store. So the second thing here in our list is store. And the first thing is, well, what do we rename it from? Well, it's different in each one, but because we've got the column name here, we could just put that in our formula. So for each row, it's going to go find the column name for the second column and replace it with store. Click OK. Boom. So now, region store, region store, region store. All right, that's a lot of the hard stuff. I'm going to go ahead and remove these other columns. We don't need to do this step. I think it's just going to make the whole thing a little easier to look at. So up here, I'm going to right-click on rename and remove other columns. Great. So now, the last big thing we have to do is we have to unpivot. We have to unpivot everything but region and store, which is why we need these to be specific names. So we're going to say everything that isn't region or store, go ahead and unpivot that. So all of these values are going to kind of get sort of, imagine like a door closing. They're going to sort of rotate down. So we'll have 5 times as many rows, one for each day. We're going to do that for each one of these tables. Okay. So again, add column, add custom column. We're going to call this unpivot. Call it whatever we want to. I'm going to call it unpivot. So the function is table dot unpivot other columns. Well, which tables do we want to unpivot? We want to unpivot each one of these little ones. So we're going to double click on rename. Okay. So what are the columns you don't want to unpivot? So it says unpivot other columns. What things are we excluding from the list? Well, we don't want to unpivot region or store. So we're going to open curly brace, open quotation mark, region, close quotation mark, open quotation mark, store. Those are the 2 columns that we do not want to unpivot. All right, so now that we've got the ones we don't want to unpivot, we're going to end up needing 2 new columns. One for what these columns headers are currently, that's going to be the date, and one for what each one of the values are, right? So if you hit the button up here in Transform, it does this for you, but we have to type it in by hand. So what do we want? All these columns, when they get rotated down, what do we want to put them in? What's that new column going to be called? Well, we're going to call it dates, or date, I guess more accurately. And what is each one of these little dollar values? Well, we could call it value or sales, and what the heck, let's just call it sales. We can call it total sales if we wanted to, but sales is just fine. So we're going to close parentheses, and we're going to click OK. And so now we have this nice table that has been fully unpivoted. So rather than having the days across here, across the top, the days are now in their own column. Okay. So all we have to do now is expand this, and we'll basically be done. So just to clean things up, I'm going to right-click here, remove other columns, and I'm going to go up here to my bunny ears, my expand column button, left-click on it, and it says, hey, do you want to expand all these columns? Yeah, I want to expand all those. Do you want to use the original column name as prefix? That would be so you'd get columns like unpivot.date and unpivot.region. Nope, we don't want that. Uncheck it, and click OK. Cool. Hey, this is basically done. So let's just do a few things to clean up. It's done some funny stuff with the order, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to drag store see, I'm going to drag store before there. Oop, maybe if I drag, there we go. Oh, I see. I've got all of them selected. I have to select one of the columns and drag it to the end. That's going to work way better. Okay, so let's change the type here. This should be a date. This should be text. Oh, this should also be text. I could have done that all at once, but I'll do it one at a time. And this should be a fixed decimal number for currency. Perfect. Okay. Well, I hope you can see. Gosh, this would have been really, really hard to do without these techniques. And so being able to create these custom columns where you sort of one by one manipulate these little micro tables can be very useful and can let you do some stuff that would otherwise be basically impossible. All right, well, I do hope that was helpful, and I will see you next video.